Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto built his own harem, Hinata times Fem Kyūbi times Anko, Naruto Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Do you really think those two will be here? Asked Milan with a pout on her face, waiting with Naruto in her arms. They'll be here, he said. In fact, they should be here right about now. I didn't know that you were bringing a guest, Naruto-kun, said Tsukiko, from behind the duo, although I suppose we didn't say that you couldn't bring one either. Dobi, finished Sasuke, his upfront arrogance back in his voice, before the two of them finished together at the same time. But either way, our mom would like to meet the person that's been with you for the time you were out of the village. Naruto had been curious, who was the twins' mother that they were talking about? I'm glad to finally meet your mom, but I don't think I know her. This time it was Sasuke that started the sentence. You may not know her, but she definitely knows you. We don't know how, but we suppose she knows you enough to call for you by name. Now Milan was interested. What was it that the twins' mother wanted with Naruto? Even more curious was how she knew the apple of her eye by name. Was she like the other bigots in this hellhole of a village glaring at the two of them as they passed by? Nah, she probably wasn't like that, but still, she couldn't let her guard down, not when she didn't know this woman, and especially not since she noticed that several of the boys were looking at her with lecherous grins on their eyes, and even though she could take them all on, Milan knew it was only a matter of time before she had to deal with outright rape attempts. She simply grabbed Naruto gently by the hand, and started following the twins, her guard continuously up. Fugaku's mansion, Uchiha District, 3:45 p.m. The mansion of Uchiha Fugaku was a place of lavish splendor, and a place of tragedy. 5 years ago, the night before the disappearance of Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Itachi had murdered his own clan, leaving his mother and twin siblings alive. Nobody knew what happened. Uchiha Itachi was known to be a level-headed ninja in addition to his talent. Why he would do such a thing had baffled even the Yamanaka clan. It was here that Uchiha Sasuke and Uchiha Tsukiko had come home to see their father dead, and their mother about to be slain. It wasn't clear what happened, but what is known is that afterwards, the twins were thrust into the duty of reviving the clan while Makoto served as substitute head of the clan until Sasuke was of age to take command. Now however, Fugaku's mansion had been converted into a clinic for optometry and ophthalmology, and in the clinic, Makoto was at work with a patient. Well then Sinazaka-san, began Makoto, writing up her clinical charts for the patient. The surgery's done and I've made sure to cut cleanly, but for now, keep this blindfold on and come back to me in a couple of months so that I can check up on your recovery. Thanks doc, said the patient, I'll be seeing you in 2 months then. As the last patient started to vacate the premises, Makoto began to close down the clinic. She was open up until around this time. As she started closing shop, she heard the sounds of 4 footsteps entering the grounds followed by a unified, "Mom, we're home." Makoto turned to see the visitors. Before her were the twins, but behind them was a little girl with a bun in her hair, and a very familiar sight she never thought she'd see again. Welcome home kids, she said with a welcoming smile on her face. And who is this newcomer? Mom, meet our new classmates, Uzumaki Naruto and Baihei Milan. She had appraised the girl Milan with a look of interest. So this beautiful little girl was the last of the Baihei family. Yes, she was such a pure specimen. Her real interest was for Uzumaki Naruto. He had grown in 5 years. The only additions she noticed on him aside from his change of clothing were the red arm that was carrying a chain seal, and the fact that he was wearing a blindfold. She turned to Milan, and greeted her with a warm smile. So you're the girl I've heard so much about from the twins, she began. You're even prettier than I thought. Milan simply turned red from embarrassment at the compliment. Oh, no, I'm not pretty, I've a long ways to go before I can even deserve being called that. Makoto chuckled. the humble ones were always the more fun to tease. You don't give yourself enough credit. If I didn't know any better, I'd say you'd be a rival in a beauty contest with Tsukiko. Tsukiko heard the jib at her, and simply blushed. Mom. All joking aside though, why don't you and Sasuke take Milan with you on a tour of the mansion? I'm pretty sure you kids will have much to talk about afterwards. Upon hearing that, Tsukiko and Sasuke simply nodded in acknowledgement and took Milan by the hand, leaving Makoto alone with Naruto. She simply sighed. So long had she wanted to bring Naruto here, and away from the torment of his life prior to his training trip. So many things had gotten in the way, but given what happened in the past, she knew she had to take him in slowly. It was already bad enough she failed him and his parents. She did not want to make things worse by revealing to him what was done behind his back. Naruto, if you'll just follow me, I'd like to do a checkup on your eyes. Sure thing, ma'am, but I don't think I can pay you. No worries, I do checkups for free, she said, quickly cutting him off with a very motherly tone, so you can just relax your sunny little head. Naruto wasn't sure, but he was sure he'd heard that voice before, but it was so long that he doesn't exactly remember. That said, he was led by the hand to a chair. Now, I'm going to need your blindfold off for us to start. Sure thing. There was nothing to it, just a checkup, and that would be all. He'll contemplate the familiarity of that voice he heard from Mrs. Uchiha. Makoto, on the other hand, watched as Naruto untied the back of his blindfold, and opened his eyes. What she saw had brought pain to her heart. As she inspected the eye, she remembered that the Naruto she knew had the cerulean blue eyes of his father, and the glittering of his mother. These eyes were frosted over with cataracts. But even under that fog in his eyes, she could still see his parents in him. Chakra damage to your eyes has caused cataracts in them, she began, continuing to investigate further. This is common in people with dojutsu. How did you lose your sight? I lost it while learning a technique from my sensei. He began, he taught me a technique, and then I accidentally learned another one through it. After that, my world started going dark. The price of the gods. Yes. How did you know? Makoto simply sighed. When Uchiha get to a certain part of their lives, normally at the peak of their power, their Sharingan changes to become more powerful. However, this comes at a price as they keep using the special variation the Sharingan more. The Uchiha that keep using this special variation of the Sharingan eventually go blind. How that's possible, I'm not sure, but legends say that this is a price of the gods for attaining power. It was then that Naruto grinned, and started speaking quietly. You're very insightful, and I can definitely see that your daughters have inherited more than just your smell of cedar wood. She turned and looked at Naruto with surprise in her eyes. Naruto knew. Before she could deny anything, Naruto continued in his quiet voice. I'll admit, the genjutsu was able to fool my ears and to an extent my chakra sense, but it couldn't really fool my nose. For you see, while a man may very well have same scent combination as his twin sister, the difference is in the intensity. The scent of a man often hits my nose like a bear mauling a tiger, while women tend to have a much gentler edge to their scent combinations, and both Sasuke and Tsukiko had really soft scents. The only question I have for you now, if you don't mind me asking, is why the deception? Now she was impressed. Makoto knew that because he was blind, Naruto compensated for it with his other senses. To know that even his nose was that powerful really spoke volumes of his perception to her. She knew that she had a secret to keep, but at the same time, it was kind of useless to keep the secret in front of someone that already figured it out. She let out a sigh, whether out of frustration at the fact that they had been found out, or the fact that Naruto just pressed the issue a bit, she didn't know. She checked around to make sure nobody was around before she activated a high-level privacy seal on the door. By Uchiha law, the only time when women can take any sort of power in the clan is when there are too few clan members and the heir is too young to take up the position of clan head. The only problem is that the heir has to be a boy. If there is no male heir, Then the female heirs of the clan have to produce a male heir by the age of 17 or face disownment. The civilian council has left my daughters alone because of this law and the genjutsu that my husband had placed. If they find out the true identity of my girls, then I fear for their safety. The Ninja Academy is yet another buffer, but if they are discovered to be girls, then they could still be kidnapped for sinister purposes whether or not they are students of the academy. The only time I can think of that they'll be safer is when they are at least genin level ninja, but even then, I'll fear for their safety because they are still my little girls. Now Naruto understood. He had seen firsthand the corruption of the civilian council due to the fact that he'd taken his fair share of beatings, but he was not sure how the twins would handle possibly worst fate to ever befall him, and that would be rape attempts. As he contemplated his options, he knew what his answer was. Your secret is safe with me, but out of curiosity, what is Sasuke's real name? Makoto looked at the boy with relief in her eyes. Even though his eyes were frosted over, she could tell he meant it. Her name is Satsuki. Before she could continue hugging Naruto, the metal chime at the front door of the mansion sounded off. Now who could that be? As she contemplated on the identity of her visitor, she turned back to Naruto. How about I take you to the dining area? I've just boiled a pot of tea. As he stood up, Naruto started putting his blindfold back on. That'll be nice, although shouldn't we wait for the others to be at the table? Good idea, I'll see if I can get those two to bring your friend over. Fugaku's mansion, front gate, 5 minutes later. Higurashi Tenten had just arrived at the front door of the Uchiha mansion. She knew that during her career as a ninja, Uchiha Makoto was a frequent customer of her family's arsenal, so it was no wonder she made friends with her father, even though her new career was as an eye doctor, and that all of her scalpels are special ordered from Higurashi Arsenal, that did not seem to diminish the friendship she still had with Hiden. Although it was a bit of a surprise that she had ordered weapons for once, sure, they were Iida, but still. Before she could think any more on that, or even ring the chime again, she saw the gate open, and one woman standing in the doorway. Ah, Tenten. Good to see you. I trust you are well. As she studied Uchiha Makoto, Tenten noted that this was a very beautiful woman. Midnight black hair that matched her coal-colored eyes, a fine hourglass-shaped figure that recovered well after giving birth to twins, pale skin, D-sized. Why this woman has not remarried by now, she'll never know. But either way, she has some business to take care of. I'm fine Uchiha-sama, she said. I trust your day has been as productive as mine. Anyway, I've brought your order for 2 Iida. Dad told me to tell you he was sorry for the delay. He's had to argue with quite a few ninja accusing him of selling them defective weapons. The nerve of them. Our weapons work fine. Well, we can talk about it later. I seem to have left my purse in the den. Why don't you have a walk around the mansion? Don't worry about finding me, I'll find you. Dining area. Naruto walked around in the dining area. Feeling around, he had found the dining table, the cushions for the family to sit on, and several other things. The room itself was the traditional style room, if the tatami mats covering the floor were any indication. As his touch began to find its way to the walls, he found that it was not an overly large room, not too small as to be inhospitable to guests, but not too large for a small family either. His hands continued to wander around until they found a door with a knob, and a small one to boot. What could be behind it? Once he turned the knob, his hands had started ruffling around in the closet until he found something. His fingers had rubbed along the surface of something made of lacquer-coated wood. It was small, and sort of rectangular. As he continued to feel around the wooden object, he found a sharp edge that led into a hole in the object before he felt 3 large wooden pegs with what he assumed was silk being wound through them, and then he finally found the reason why those silk strings were tightly wound around using 3 wooden pegs the second he plucked on one of them along a long and thin wooden shaft. He had just found a samisen. Although judging by the fact that the sound was very abrupt, Naruto ran his hand down the strings of the samisen, and found that the bachi was being held in place by all 3 strings. This was good, perhaps this was a good review for him. Prior to his blindness, Old Man GSD had taken him to the Baihei estate to learn from their musicians about the intricate details of rhythm using music. All he said back then was that one of these days, what he learned there would have a lot of value in the future. It was there that he had met Mylan. She had taught him how to play his first instrument, which was unsurprisingly the samisen. Their relationship wasn't exactly the best at first, but it wasn't long until they became closer, and as their relationship blossomed, so too did Naruto's skill in playing. By the time Mylan was the last member of her family, Naruto mastered his skills in playing the samisen to an adept level, was barely competent the biwa, and was a beginner with the koto. Taking his thoughts back to the area he was in, Naruto eventually found himself wandering further into the closet. He began to realize, upon finding other instruments, that he had stumbled upon the music closet. Looks like someone had a liking for music. As he continued to feel around the closet, his hands had eventually found another instrument, with what he assumed were metal bolts that tied down 6 metal strings, a flat bridge, and a hollow body with a flat almond-shaped object held down by the strings near the head. Oh, he knew this instrument. It was an instrument from Kaminari no Kuni. How the Uchiha family had gotten their hands on it, he may never know, but what he did know was that this was his favorite instrument. He picked up the instrument and started walking out of the closet. Once he found a spot on the floor he could sit on, he pulled the pick out of the strings, and started strumming at each string, making sure they were tuned just right. Once he was satisfied with the sounds coming from the guitar, he simply relaxed, and began playing. It was a song he had thought of that evoked images of a home. A place where one would belong, and with that, he continued to play before the scent of other people being nearby started filling his nose. They had come to investigate the song he was playing, no doubt. If the slower steps were any indication, ah well, better greet these people now. Outside the dining area, she could not help but marvel at the sights she was seeing as she walked through the mansion. True, she had seen her fair share of mansions, but the Uchiha mansion seemed the most dignified of them all. The cherry trees, the peaches, even the Zen garden were things she seemed to appreciate. Before long, Tenten had heard a strange sound from afar. At first, it sounded like just a few strings being plucked, and then it started being more coherent, and the few strings being plucked started to soothe her as she started moving closer and closer, trying to find the source of the beat. She was not an avid listener of music, but even she could tell the sound of talent from afar. Tenten walked around and around the mansion, trying to find the source, until she found herself facing a shoji door where the music was at its loudest. She walked closer and closer until she found herself a few inches away from the door. The curiosity was gripping her, compelling her to open that door to see who it was that was playing such fine music. Some part of her, however, said that perhaps whoever it was did not want to be disturbed. She then reasoned that a quick peek at the musician wouldn't hurt, and so she slid the door open ever so slightly to allow her to peek into the room. She scanned the room, and the first thing she noted was that she was looking at someone's back. He was wearing a black hooded vest, and gray pants, and his right arm was strumming whatever instrument he was playing. As he continued playing, apparently not noticing that she was in the area, she slowly started to open the door a little more. So someone has come to hear me play, he said a little louder over the music. Something about that voice turned her on, while at the same time, she felt she knew that voice. Let's see now, judging from the sound of your footsteps, I would guess that you are about 45 kilograms and stand at roughly 154 centimeters tall, give or take, a very healthy statistic for a girl about 13 years of age such as yourself. Now she was impressed. Tenten opened the door a little wider and started taking in a little more of the stranger. You're very good, but how did you know I was 13? I could hear your heartbeat. It was too strong and healthy to be that of a woman of about, say, 70 years. Either way, it was a bit of a guesstimate. As she looked on at the stranger in the house, she noted that he had defined arms, and a very well sculpted body, but what really stood out to her was the fact that he was wearing a blindfold, and that his head was covered in a short mop of spiky, sun-kissed hair. She knew something was familiar about this boy, and now she knew who he reminded her of, and the fact that he had 3 whisker marks on each of his cheeks had confirmed it. Foxy-kun. The boy simply flinched upon hearing that name, and then turned to face Tenten with a look of recognition on his face. Yes, this was Uzumaki Naruto, the friend she had made almost 7 years ago in the slums. She watched as he carefully put the instrument down and started to lift both of his hands cautiously before settling them both on her cheeks, and she started feeling hot as he started running his hands all over her face gently, glad that he was not able to see the slight tinge of red she was taking on. As she felt his hands exploring her face in an innocent yet sensuous way, she remembered all the times she had shared with him, from the day she first found him in the bushes when she got lost in the slums, to the day before he left Konoha on that training trip of his. As he stopped exploring, he had gently pulled his hands off her face, much to her slight displeasure. "Is that you, Tenten?" No sooner than he had posed the question, Tenten simply didn't care about her image as a tough girl. She just wanted to pull him into a hug as she started letting out tears of joy. Angry as she was that he didn't try to find her, she was too happy to see Naruto to care. And besides, how she was hugging him would be both a punishment and a present as it were. "I was afraid I'd never see you again. I'm sorry I didn't try to find you sooner," he said, blushing madly as his face was pressed into Tenten's, "but would you please let me go? I'm pretty sure that this is an awkward position for you." Well, isn't this an adorable sight? Upon hearing that one line, Tenten looked up and noted Makoto standing outside the dining area with a cat ate the canary grin on her face, and in her hands was the purse she had been looking for. She immediately let go of Naruto with a reddened face. "Don't worry, your secret is safe with me, Tenten," added Makoto, the amusement still on her face. "Would you like to join us for tea?" Sure thing, Uchiha-sama. Splendid. As for you 3, since you're here, you might as well make yourselves useful and bring out the crackers." Tenten wondered exactly why she made mention of 3 others, until she heard the sound of a shoji door opening, and in walked the Uchiha twins, and a girl she had not seen before, all glaring at her with daggers in their eyes. Jealousy no doubt at the fact that she knew Naruto before any of them did. All she could do, however, was glare back. Due to the intensity of the glares, one could swear they heard the crackling of electricity in the air from the apparent 4-way rivalry that had developed between them. 2 hours later. The tea party had been over almost an hour ago. Tenten had gone home with the pay owed to her father for the item Makoto had ordered. Milan had led Naruto away by the hand to their apartment, and the twins stood waiting in the training ground waiting for their next lesson in the exquisite art of swordsmanship. The light and bouncing, clack, clack, of the twins sparring with each other filled the air as they cried out the names of the strikes. "Men, men, do, coat, men, do, men." As she walked towards the training ground carrying a shinai, Makoto looked back on everything that had happened so far concerning Naruto. When she had heard from the reading of Minato and Kushina's will that she was to be his legal guardian, she had mixed feelings about it, before she settled on confidence that she would not disappoint her 2 best friends. She had resolved that little Naruto would grow up with love and a proper family, and become a ninja that would make his parents proud. Once her mind was made up, she had made the trek to Konoha General Hospital to pick up the child so that she could do her duty. The second she stepped into the room where she had left young Naruto, she saw Sarutobi there. She didn't have a good feeling about his appearance, and when she saw that Naruto was no longer in his crib, she began to question him about it. When she learned that Hiruzen had sent Naruto to live in an orphanage, this had begun the first of 3 earfuls he would be receiving from her, not to mention all the glares of utter contempt he would be receiving from her and all the other clan heads upon learning of his fate. Hiruzen had assured her and the other clan heads that this was the best thing for everyone in the long run. To be honest, they all knew he had a very legitimate reason for doing this. Konoha was weakened as many of the ninja had died sealing the Kyūbi no Kitsune into Naruto, and the second that her enemies heard of this, they would move on in. This would have been exacerbated by the fact that if people had found out that the yellow flash had survived by a son, then even Iwa would find the allure of revenge too strong to resist. Yes, those were legitimate enough reasons behind his actions, but it still didn't remove the bitter taste in her mouth, knowing that she had failed in her promise to Minato and Kushina. That did not mean, however, that she gave up. The second she got home, she found Itachi and privately requested that he go out and find the orphanage Naruto was located at. A few days later, Itachi had returned, with a disgusted look on his face. According to him, the orphanage matron had given Naruto bad milk, and several villagers tried repeatedly to stab him to death more than a couple of times before he and other Anbu, apparently from the other clans, stopped them. Yes, this was disgusting. How far the villagers would go simply to harm one child who had nothing to do with the deaths of their loved ones, and then she realized that there was another reason she started hating Hiruzen along with several other ninja, and that reason came about when that foolish old man revealed to an ignorant civilian populace that the Kyūbi no Kitsune was sealed into a child. Since then, she had started making discreet trips to the orphanage Naruto was it to make sure he was well taken care of, giving him better food and advising him not to share it with the other orphans. Those kids were being raised to hate him, so why share with people who didn't deserve it? In the meantime, she had continuously sent in numerous adoption requests, all of which were turned down both by the civilian council, Sarutobi himself albeit reluctantly, and unsurprisingly her own husband, Fugaku absolutely hated Minato, and this was mostly due to the fact that the latter became Hokage and he didn't. 2 years into her quest to get Naruto a proper family, she'd heard rumor from Hyuga Otome, heaven rest her soul, that she was not the only one trying to adopt him, while she couldn't count the other ninja that tried to do so. She did know that Nara Shikaku had made 13 attempts in total so far in that week, Yamanaka Inoichi had made 20, Akamichi Shuza tried 24 times this month, even Hiashi and Otome herself had tried to adopt him almost 100 times for the past month. To the point that Inuzuka Sume had tried almost thrice daily for the past 2 years by every other member of her clan. One of the few clan heads that didn't participate in this was Aburame Shibi, not out of any malice for Naruto but for the fact that he lets out an aura that slowly kills their Kikaichu beetles, and out of those clan heads he was the only one with a legitimate reason. Once Naruto reached 5 years of age, he was literally kicked out of the orphanage at night, and in front of a crowd that immediately started stomping on him the second he hit the floor. After that event, she eventually took him into the Uchiha safe house in the slums before she stormed into Sarutobi's office and gave him his second earful, being longer than the last one, due to his response that he wanted Naruto to grow up with a normal childhood. Upon hearing that, she didn't care anymore. She wanted Sarutobi to pay for his inept care of Naruto, and for disregarding the last wishes of a true hero of Konoha. True, he spent some time with Naruto and treated him like a grandson, but considering how important the boy was to the village, Makoto thought he would have taken better care of him. Her days of keeping him incognito were limited, but they were some of the most joyful days she had next to spending time with her daughters, right up until Hiruzen got him a small apartment to live in, and forbade her from ever visiting him. When she got home that day, Makoto found herself siding with Fugaku in his coup and turning a blind eye to the crimes of her clan if only to protect her family, and to make sure that after the whole mess was over, she could finally start to do her duty as Naruto's guardian proper. When she heard of her husband's true intentions for Naruto a few months down the road, Makoto immediately told Itachi, whom at this point, she had suspected he was very likely the spy for the Hokage, to tell Sarutobi she was willing to cooperate, and that she had a written message for him. The exact contents of this missive, word for word was, "Don't mistake my assistance for a sign of forgiveness. I hate you with all my heart for what you did and didn't do for Naruto, and nothing is going to make my hatred any clearer. Keep in mind that I'm giving you all that I know because I hate Danzo even more, and so before I give you this information, you must give me a written promise that you'll grow a spine and show the civilian council their true place in this village, and if you still lack the courage to do so, then at the very least you'll promise to take better care of Naruto. It wasn't long until Makoto received the response that she gave up what she knew of the plot, and everything she had turned a blind eye to. When the day came that Itachi was sent to kill his own family members, she was prepared to die for taking part in a plan that would have involved Naruto being tied down to a table and then raped by every female member of the clan using him as breeding stock, and her own daughters possibly being a part of this corruption started by their father. What she was not prepared for was Itachi sparing her and the twins, placing them in the Genjutsu world of Tsukuyomi, and hospitalizing them on the same night that Naruto had gained that demonic arm of his. While in Tsukuyomi, Itachi told her that the reason he spared her was because he knew her motivations for her support of the coup were pure and that someone needed to make sure the twins would walk down the right path. When she woke up a couple weeks later, she saw her daughters asleep and in each other's arms, and that Satsuki's identity as Sasuke was not compromised. Much to her relief, she knew the clan law, and so did they. But then she realized, now that the three of them were the last Uchiha alive, sans Itachi who she knew would be forced to go on the run after his actions, she now had the chance to adopt Naruto, and so she called Sarutobi to talk about the massacre in private. To her rage, she had learned that Naruto was no longer in the village, and that he was taken in by a blind swordsman to be trained to defend himself before he comes to the academy. That was the third and most recent time she had given Sarutobi an earful, and she knew he had a right to feel guilty. If he had thought out his actions more carefully, if he had taken better care of Naruto, then he would not have needed to be taken out of the village for training this early in his life. Now, however, as she stepped into the training ground with the twins ready and willing for the next lesson, Makoto wondered if it was too late to be Naruto's guardian. Naruto sat around on the chair, Milan, Ino, and Tsukiko snuggling up to him and the other girls, one of them disguised, sitting closer to him as he waited for the results of the exam. He couldn't study, given that he was not given anything to accommodate a blind student, no raised letters, nobody to reiterate what he had learned save for Milan and apparently the other girls that seemed to like him. It's as if someone wanted him to fail every one of those damn exams, not even an oral test. It was then that the door to the back of the classroom opened and in walked the roughly 130-kilogram steps of both Iruka and Mizuki plus the rustle of a paper, no doubt containing the results of the exams. "All right class, the results of your exams are in," called in Iruka. "I hope you will all take in these results and use them to do better next time. To those of you that did well, I say, congratulations." As everyone started to get up to check their grades, Milan simply pinned him to the chair before he could go anywhere. "Don't bother," she said, "I'll go see your grade." "Where can I go? I can't even see." Once she was assured that Naruto wouldn't be leaving his seat, Milan left with the other girls to check on their grades. Upon reaching their destination, the two girls saw their grades. For the academic part of their tests, the top 5 for the boys, from highest to lowest were Sasuke, Shikamaru, Shino, Kiba, and some kid named Bakana Hihimaru. On the girls' side, the top 5 were Tsukiko, Sakura, Ino, Hinata, and Milan. For the taijutsu part, the top 5 were Sasuke, Kiba, Shino, Shikamaru, and again, Hihimaru. The girls however had Milan sharing the top spot with Tsukiko due to the tie, followed by Hinata, Ino, Sakura, and a girl named Korea Nojiko. This did not sit well with the girls, as they knew that Naruto had been studying hard, and Milan was especially disappointed in the fact that people were still discriminating against her apparently unknowing lover. That said, the girls went back up to the stands, and sat next to Naruto. "So how did everyone do?" Milan didn't know how to spare his feelings, but she spoke up anyway. "Oh, everyone made it so far. And how was my grade?" Before she could answer, Milan was cut off by Ino. "It was fine, nothing to worry about." He let out a disappointed sigh. "I didn't do well, did I?" Tsukiko was about to deny it when she saw that he had this look on his face that said, "Don't bother lying to me." "Yep, I should have known. I'm pretty sure I felt malice when I was around those other teachers." "Ah, But who cares, they're probably just a bunch of idiots anyway. Upon hearing that, the five of them wondered just how he was willing to take such a savage yet indirect beating from teachers. They all knew that there was a lot of corruption in this village, it made its ugly head known, and many of the civilians and a good number of ninja were a part of it. It didn't help their case that the many students were laughing at the fact that Naruto was the dead last. Even Sakura had a look of pride in her eyes at the fact that she had beaten that annoying moron. Naruto had to cover his ears as she shouted something along the lines of, "I always knew Sasuke-kun would beat that annoyingly stupid brat. Serves him right for getting between me and Sasuke-kun. True love prevails." The rest of the fangirls agreed on that train of thought. There was no way that the blind kid would ever beat the power of the Uchiha, no matter how hot or skilled he was. Although to be honest, even Sakura had to admit that Naruto was eye candy material, but in her eyes, he was just that, a hot yet dumb blonde who depended on other people to get around. He probably didn't even thank the people that helped him, the brat. Didn't his parents teach him to be grateful? As they continued to ponder about the hot eye candy, Sakura and the other Sasuke fangirls wondered why the other founding member of the Sasuke fan club was being seen snuggling up to Naruto, but this was nothing compared to the perverted thoughts they all had of Sasuke and Naruto being the stars of a great yaoi novel. Sakura, on the other hand, simply saw Naruto as a rival for Sasuke's affections. Maybe Sasuke wasn't gay, but the blonde bimbo probably was. Ha! Like Sasuke would fall for someone like that. After class. The setting of the sun, the relative peace of the area around him, this would be a good moment for Naruto to practice expanding his chakra reserves by extending the reach of his chakra senses. So far, he was able to send a light 5 kHz chakra pulse up to 500 meters away. Now he was aiming to intensify the frequency to 300 MHz to that distance. Milan was inside the supermarket, purchasing groceries for tonight and tomorrow, and so he may as well do something to wait. As he sat on the bench gradually increasing the frequency of the chakra pulse, he had barely reached 100 MHz when he could not help but notice that there was a lot of hatred directed at him. He could hear some people were telling their children to stay away from him, that he was a scary monster that wanted to eat them. He could feel a good number of glares directed at him, before he sent a wave of killing intent their way to drive them away after they soiled themselves in terror. Not a wise move on his part, but at least he was alone now, and he could finally get to his meditations in peace. Before he could contemplate anything, he realized that his wish for a peaceful moment of meditation would not come true upon hearing a very loud and very familiar voice screaming, "Help!" Naruto was startled upon hearing that scream piercing his ears. Seriously, that girl needed to learn to control her voice. He was just about to get angry when he finally smelled what was going on. He smelled fear, arousal, and dogs. Oh, just perfect. Not one day since he took care of that mutton, Naruto found himself wanting to beat down the boy that smelled like a toilet that hadn't been flushed for weeks. He really wasn't looking forward to doing this, not after the abuse his nose had received yesterday from that horrible smell. Darkened alleyway. The Hyuga girl tried to fight off her assailant, but Inuzuka Kiba was too strong an opponent. The puppy tried to keep his owner in check, but to no avail. The boy simply would not listen to reason and knocked Akamaru away. Deep in her mind, she was praying anybody would come to her rescue. "Nobody's going to come save you," he said menacingly, with the hint of a mocking tone in it. "Since the Uchiha girl and Hinata-chan are both that blind asshole's mates, I can't exactly touch either of them. You, on the other hand, Ms. Hyuga, personally, I think you're not as pretty as Hinata-chan, but I think you're close enough, but you're about the only girl that isn't taken by Sasuke or that blind. Help em." At this point, Kiba simply slapped the Hyuga girl to make her shut up. "You're not going to get any help, bitch. You belong to me now." The second that Kiba managed to get his hands on the girl's blouse, he knew that victory was his, and he'll teach this bitch a lesson one way or another. "Hey, toilet head." Kiba had barely turned his head to find the intruder when he was clocked across the head with a very heavy haymaker to disorient him. The rape victim then watched as her savior grabbed her assailant by the shoulders so that he could spike a knee into the would-be rapist's solar plexus before finishing off with a Glasgow kiss to his nose, finally knocking him out and breaking said nose. It was then that he turned to face her, and said, "You okay?" The Hyuga girl was speechless. She had never met this boy before, so why was he helping her? Why would he do that? And why was it that he stood in such a way that the reddened sun was acting like a halo behind his head? Why was this appearance turning her on? This wasn't supposed to happen. I'm fine, thank. It was then that he raised his hand to silence her politely. No need to thank me, he said, I just can't stand rapists in any shape or form. What's going on here? Naruto turned and faced the arriving form of Milan, walking up with grocery bags in her arms. The horned dog on the ground was trying to rape this little lady here, so I knocked him out. The look of horror on Milan's face was very clear as she dropped the bags in shock before running up to the Hyuga girl with a concerned look on her face. With that on mind, she ran up to her and pulled her into a hug as she started stroking her long, black hair, cooing gently and assuring her that everything was okay. She then turned to see Naruto walking towards Kiba's unconscious body. What are you going to do, Naruto? What else? I'm going to drag his body to whichever clan compound he's from. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to use his scent to find out where he lives. Before he could move in close to smell the horrid smell of urine from 3 different dogs, Naruto heard barking nearby. He then found that there was still a puppy around. Getting his attention, Akamaru was it. In any case, Naruto had turned up the frequency of his chakra pulse to 1 GHz, and saw the puppy outside the alleyway. The look on its canine face was beckoning him to follow him. Milan, would you be a dear and take the girl home and wait for me there? Also, you may want to find Hinata, she'll probably know who she is, judging by the smell of medicinal herbs and bath salts about her. Milan had a look of determination on her face upon hearing the request. You got it. It was then that she led the Hyuga girl away, but not before gaining satisfaction from landing a low kick to Kiba's side hard enough to make him grunt in pain. Upon seeing that Milan had led the rape victim away, Naruto turned to face Akamaru. Can you understand me? With his 1 GHz chakra pulse, Naruto noted that Akamaru nodded for, yes. Okay then, before we go, I'm going to need to smell you so that I don't get lost, understand? Upon getting approval from the puppy, Naruto walked up and sniffed around at Akamaru's head, committing his smell to memory. Once he grabbed Kiba by the hood of his jacket, they started walking down the empty streets of Konoha. Inuzuka Compound Veterinary Clinic, roughly an hour later. Inuzuka Hana sat around at the reception desk. The Heimaru triplets were sleeping around her. Business was slow in the vet today. Not too many people had a lot of pets that needed to get better. But then again, she wasn't surprised. The Inuzuka clan had the best clinic for animals in general, and so of course not a lot of people would have a lot of pet problems around here. Still, however, it was getting very boring. Give her a mission. Give her a bird with a broken wing. Anything but this dull boredom that sometimes came with having a free day. Hell, she'd even take that vacation day with Kurenai and maybe even get Anko out to give her some fresh air while they're at it. But no, her mother was out and looking for more herbs to make medicine with, medicines they just happened to be low on, and that were too expensive to purchase. Before she could continue on with her silent ranting, the bells sounded as the doors they were attached to opened. Finally, something to do. She turned door with a smile on her face, until she noted Akamaru walking in with a blind and blonde boy dragging something heavy behind him. Something was off about this picture. Akamaru was never far from Kiba, so where was that little brat? Excuse me, began the blind boy, but is this the Inuzuka compound? Hana studied the little boy. His hair was the sun-kissed variety, and his body was muscular for someone of his age. She wondered exactly how he would look when fully grown up. And then she noted that the boy had 3 whisker-like marks on each side of his face. Oh, she knew who this was. She'd protected that vulpine little face too many times from a lot of moronic and spiteful villagers to forget him. To think that Naruto had changed so much in 5 years was staggering in her mind, coupled in with what she'd heard of him lately, and she began to think of scenarios involving him and her alone in the park, doing things. She then shook her thoughts back to reality and wondered exactly what Akamaru was doing alone, but she decided to ask first as to what her guest wanted. It most definitely is. Why do you ask? Nothing special. I just wanted to tell you that I've dragged an unconscious would-be rapist here, and let me tell you, it wasn't exactly easy to do. Not on my arm, and most definitely not on my nose. A would-be rapist. Here. Now this Hana had to see. She got up from her seat behind the reception desk, and noted to her horror that the would-be rapist was her own little brother. What did he do? I was meditating when I heard the sound of a girl screaming for help. That's when I smelled his stink, and I realized what was going on. Right after that, I practically beat him senseless, taking care to knock him out. The girl's laying low at my place for now. It was then that Akamaru started barking in agreement, and it would appear that Kiba had another witness against him, as Akamaru told her that he'd been listening in on Kiba. Hana could only clench her fist in rage upon learning that her little brother's envy against Naruto had finally gotten him to snap, and so he decided to take his frustrations out on any girl he found by taking her virginity. And it just so happened that the unfortunate victim of this attempt was a Hyuga. Ohiashi was not going to be happy at all. What's going to happen now? Asked Naruto, genuinely concerned about the situation. Before she could answer, a cold presence had made itself known in the reception area of the vet. I'm very sure you don't have to worry about that, said a feral yet attractive female voice laced with cold hatred. Kiba will get his just desserts. But first, we're going to have to see the Hyuga clan head to formally apologize to him. Hana turned to find that the cold presence was coming from her own mother, standing in the doorway with a basket of herbs in her arms. Oh, Kiba was in deep now. Although she had to wonder, just how long was she standing there for? Did she hear everything? Before you ask Hana, yes, I heard everything that was spoken in this room. It really disappoints me that my own son would do such a thing. I'm going to leave now, said Naruto, gaining the attention of the two women in the room. I'm sorry I beat up your son, Mrs. Inuzuka. Don't worry about it, pup, she said, softening her gaze a bit for the young pup. You're not at fault here. I'm just really angry at Kiba right now. I understand that, but if you must punish him, would you please refrain from letting dogs urinate on him? I can still smell the urine of 3 different dogs on him, and those self-same dogs are in this room right now. It's really offending my nose as we speak. The two women looked to Naruto with surprise in their eyes. Only an Inuzuka would have noses that sharp. Although, judging from his situation, they found that they shouldn't be surprised that he could smell and recognize the Heimaru triplets. Blind people did tend to have sharper senses when their eyesight was gone after all. No worries, Naruto, she said, I won't let his punishment be cruel and unusual, but it will still be all manner of unpleasant. Naruto turned to face in the general direction of Sum with a look of surprise on his face. How did she know who he was? It was already strange enough that the twins' mother knew of him by name, but how did the Inuzuka clan head know of him in that manner as well? What confirmed his train of thought was that he had a feeling that she let it slip. That's strange. The Uchiha twins' mother seemed to know me enough to call for me by name. Why do you know me too? Sum let out a sigh. She really let this one slip big time. Oh well, if she's caught, she may as well come clean. She only wished she'd had the ability to help him sooner. I tried to adopt you many times. Most of the civilian council and several clan heads denied those requests, Uchiha Fugaku included. You tried to adopt me. Yeah, even before you were kicked out of the orphanage, a lot of the other clan heads and several other ninja had tried to adopt you. But circumstances wouldn't allow us to do so. I don't suppose it has anything to do with a certain fox that is now sealed in my arm now, would it? Sum and Hana looked to Naruto with a look of surprise on their faces, Naruto knew about the fox. And he was talking about it nonchalantly. Just what the hell kind of training did he go through? Before they could question him, Naruto let out a sigh when he took their silence for a yes. I should have known. Those people are so stupid, they can't even tell that if I were the Kyūbi, I would not even be a boy. And before you ask, the fox is a girl, one that can't seem to stop talking about, but a girl nonetheless. Now there was a thought, Naruto was on speaking terms with a demonic fox that turned out to be female. This was getting a mite interesting, although the two of them had thoughts along the lines of, ha. Take that you pigs. Girls rule. They were also wary of the fact that she couldn't seem to stop talking about. What does she talk about? Sometimes she'll advise me on what to do, but whenever I touch someone with my left arm, she'll whisper perverted stuff in my ear, except when it's a matter of survival. Anyway, I think you should get going now. And don't worry about Kiba. I'll see to it that he's punished accordingly, assuming of course Hiashi wants me to punish him, a very favorable outcome if you ask me. Naruto simply bowed before the two women, and started walking towards the door to the vet. Hana, why don't you take the Heimaru triplets out for a walk and escort the boy to his apartment? I'm pretty sure he should be reserving his chakra for something other than finding his way home. Upon hearing this, Hana turned to face her mother with a look of surprise in her feral features, while at the same time, Naruto froze not 2 steps away from the door before turning to face the two women. There's no need for that, Inuzuka-sama, I can find my way home fine. Yes, but it would be rude of me to send a person in your condition out without an escort to ensure he gets home safely. Naruto was not going to have any of it, but before he could open his mouth with a retort prepared in his mind, Sum was right in front of him with her index finger over his lips. Just take the offer, she said, it's the least I can do. Upon hearing that and feeling the finger leaving his lips, Naruto had realized then and there that he was fighting a losing battle. Very well then, since you're so insistent on offering, I'll accept, thank you for the assistance. No problem. Hana went to the reception desk, and woke the Heimaru triplets. Upon hearing that there would be a walk, the three brothers were excited. They all rushed to the door to wait for Hana outside, but when they found Naruto, their ears, heads, and tails drooped in submission to him as if he were the prime alpha of the Inuzuka house, just before Naruto knelt down and started petting them and their energy started to return. Sum looked upon the scene with a curious eye. From what she had noticed, all canines, be they the most cunning of foxes or the mightiest of wolf packs, seemed to submit to Naruto like an alpha of the pack, perhaps due to the fact that the Kyūbi no Yoko is herself a canine demon and thus the supreme alpha female of all canines. Perhaps this was among the lesser reasons she wanted to adopt Naruto, because she felt like she could trust the clan in his hands when he grows up and becomes the Hokage he was destined to be. Another reason was due to the fact that a while before the Uchiha massacre, she noted Fugaku having some kind of power-hungry look on his face upon hearing mention of his name. But the ultimate reason for her many attempts at adopting him was due to the fact that she knew that Minato and Kushina had wanted Naruto to be raised in an environment with love and care, which also led to why she had come to hate Hiruzen as much as Makoto. Who in the ninja community didn't know of her resentment towards the Honorable Third? She was there when Namikaze couple's will was read. She knew that Makoto was awarded legal guardianship of Naruto over his own godfather. As she watched her daughter and Naruto leave through the front door with the Heimaru triplets leading them, Sum started to reflect even further into the past concerning the days after the Namikaze will was read. Now don't get her wrong. She was glad that Jiraiya was not the one to raise him, still wished that at least he would have been the one to take care of the pup, his perverted streak be damned. She felt that if Naruto grew up with Kiba, then the latter would not have turned out as he had, that if Kiba had a brother figure in his life, he would have been a better person than if she and Hana were the only ones to raise him. She then thought back to the days before her husband died in the Kyūbi attack. Oh, how she missed that man. He always did know how to treat her right in the bed. Perhaps if he lived, then maybe things would have been better. Sume then sighed in sadness as small tears had filled her eyes. These tears had come about from sadness at the fate of her husband, and at the fate that could befall her only son. Yes, Hiyashi was most definitely going to have a conniption when he hears of what Kiba tried to do. Streets of Konoha, roughly 1 hour and 30 minutes later. I can only guess that life then was so hard, so what did you do? Well, as you can imagine, it wasn't exactly easy to earn money off the streets without doing something for the crowd in return. And so Milan and I had to think of a way to earn money. It just so happened that we stopped in front of a music store that I had an idea. Milan had a very good voice, and I was very good with stringed instruments, so you can figure out what the plan was. What started off as small talk almost 45 minutes prior had turned into a bit of story time on the part of Naruto. When talking about his interests, he revealed that among them was music, something that Hana just happened to enjoy as much as she did spending time with the Heimaru triplets. According to Naruto, while he was traveling with Old Man GSD and Milan, the two of them went out to play duets for passerbys with Naruto providing the strings and Milan singing with that supposedly heavenly voice of hers. Needless to say, they had apparently earned a lot of cash for their troubles, and this went on even after Naruto had gone blind. At least you have something to do in the future aside from ninja work, maybe I'll even attend one of your concerts. I'll take note of that. Well, here we are, 888 Fortune Road. Hana studied the area around her. It was quiet, too quiet. When she saw that the reason for the silence came from the fact that nobody was working in the buildings, she could only sigh to herself at how ridiculous people were being. It was one thing to be bigots against people with no control over the circumstances of their birth, but to have such hatred as to create a massive waste of space via a sort of exodus away from the territory of the demon brat was actually taking things too far. It was then that she noticed a few ninja going into the same apartment building that she was taking Naruto to as they reached the doorway to the apartment building. Thanks for helping me out, Inuzuka-san, said Naruto after having turned to face the Inuzuka heiress. I think I can take it from here. She watched as Naruto started walking forward and into the apartments, wondering how much muscle was in that of his. Hana was broken out of her thoughts when she heard one of the Heimaru triplets barking at her. Being an Inuzuka, speaking dog was actually second nature to her, so it was no surprise that she blushed upon understanding what that dog said. Shut up. It's not like that. Another of the triplets barked in response. Hey, it's not like I can resist. Besides, I'm pretty sure all three of you see him as alpha material too. The final triplet stayed silent, but the look in his eye said enough. Look, let's just go home. Mom probably wants me to help make sure Kiba doesn't do anything. By the way, did the three of you really have to piss on him? I'm pretty sure that he didn't do anything for you to go that far. Upon hearing that, all three triplets barked at the same time, causing her to clench her fist in rage, before she released it, knowing Kiba was going to get his pretty soon. She took a deep breath and calmed down. Okay then, so he did warrant the three of you pissing on him, although next time if you want to bring Kuromaru in to maul him, you can count on me not to tell anyone. The three dogs nodded in agreement, and started leaving with their mistress, as Hana started thinking of the possibility of mating with the last Uzumaki. Near the Hyuga compound, almost 3 weeks later. Hinata was excited to bring Naruto in to meet her family, ever since she had told her father of who it was that brought Kiba over to get his just desserts. He had been dying to meet him, and it just so happened that today was a festival in the Hyuga estate. A perfect excuse to invite him over. The problem was that Naruto and Milan, as they were constantly traveling, never had to buy formal wear, neither of them had any kimono or even a yukata to attend any festivals with, and so Hinata lent the two of them an orange yukata with blue trim for Naruto and a lilac kimono with white lotus blossoms embroidered at the bottom for Milan. It actually made the two of them blush when they helped Naruto put on his yukata due to his blindness. Hinata had the worst of the blushing as it was the first time she was seeing his well-built body without that vest of his. As she touched the ripped muscles, she could not help but think of very naughty thoughts involving them. What seemed to also give him a bit of a more dignified appearance was the fact that he slung his katana on the left side of his waist. A bit paranoid, she thought, but she understood that most people wouldn't go anywhere without a weapon, and after the incident where she was almost kidnapped, she didn't blame him. "So what can you tell me about your family, Hinata?" asked Naruto, as they were walking, eliciting an "eep" from Hinata and a blush. Well, like you said before, my family owns a spa and a medical clinic," she began. That is where much of our revenue comes from during peacetime. Many members of my clan are so arrogant, I wonder if the Uchiha were any better. Others, however, are a different matter altogether. "Sounds like they have a really big stick shoved where the sun won't shine," said Milan, leading Naruto around by the hand as usual. "But all in all, I'd like to see how bad it is in your family, because you seem like an okay person to me, a bit shy for my liking, but an okay person nonetheless." Hinata could only chuckle nervously. "Don't worry, not every Hyuga is as bad as you think, although there are one or two bad ones. We are by and large good people." As she led her friends to the estate, she began to think back on the past since she started attending the ninja academy. Before, she was a nervous wreck who tended to fail at a lot of things. All the while, she couldn't help but wonder exactly what Kyūbi's punishment was. Meanwhile, at the Inuzuka compound, he could not stand it anymore. He wanted to close his eyes, but he couldn't. Apparently, his tormentors had to go visit Uchiha Makoto to borrow a pair of those clamps that keep the patient's eyelids open. For the past few weeks now, Kyūbi was forced to watch the most disgusting thing he had ever seen, the worst kind of a straight person could ever watch, and that was gay. He watched as men started mounting each other and mating with each other. He could only think back to the words his mother uttered to him. "You brought this upon yourself, Kyūbi, and unfortunately for you, since Hyuga Hiashi didn't want to punish you, I was given the honor of doing so. You wanted see some? Well, you're going to see. In fact, you're going to be watching Inuzuka members going at it. I won't say if their canine companions will be involved though." At first, when he heard of that, Kyūbi wondered exactly what sort of punishment would involve him watching. It was paradise to him. And if it was lesbian, then aces. But then he saw that with the first couple to waltz on into the chambers where he was to be punished, neither of them were girls, they were very much effeminate Inuzuka men with really big dogs. And thus, his punishment had begun the second that his mother left, when the first gay Inuzuka men had started to pleasure each other, and Kyūbi was unable to close his eyes from the sight. To make things worse, he was watching as different gay Inuzuka couples started walking in. Some were mounting each other, their dogs were even mounting each other, some didn't bother mounting each other, and were mounting their dogs instead, who also happened to be male. Oh, how terrible. And the worst of it was whenever they would hold an orgy. And so, the ironic punishment of Inuzuka Kyūbi continued, as he was forced to watch in disgust at the sight before him, forever being scarred for life as he realized the consequences for any future rape attempts. Hyuga compound. The lanterns strung about had added the air of festivity about the place. There was no mistaking that the Hyugas were holding a celebration. This was one of the few times that the members of both the main and branch families could get together and forget the troubles and strife between the two groups. Main house families could openly enjoy a shot of sake with friends from the branch house, and vice versa, while children from the branch house could play with children in the main house. Such was the joyous air of the annual Hyuga Bond Festival, a festival meant to aid in lowering tensions between the two houses. Hinata had brought her two friends from school over to meet her father, who in turn had expressed interest in meeting Naruto. Upon going through the gates to the compound, what she saw was a sight she was always happy to see every year: none of the branch members glaring at main house members, children from both sides playing with each other, so many good sights she wanted to see in the future the day she took power. However, the air was tainted as she noted that only one or two members of the main house, all of them elders, had looked in their direction with utter contempt. She shrugged it off as the elders having been knocked off their high horses when she beat down Neji, but somehow she had a feeling she was not the subject of their glaring at the moment. So you finally showed up. Oh, she was not looking forward to hearing that voice now. Ever since he had recovered from the injuries she had inflicted upon him, Neji had been tirelessly working to get stronger. While that was a good thing for him, it only served to make him more arrogant, a fact that seemed to make his little sister accompanying him more shamed that he was her brother. Hinata knew that little Nami was not exactly happy that her brother was letting the pride get to his head. She knew that she wanted him back to the way he was, before he started spouting that rubbish about fate and destiny, and all that crap. As far as she was concerned, Nami needed her favorite cousin to beat him down as savagely as she did. Little did she know that Nami was actually thankful for it. As she looked at Naruto, she could only blush as she saw his form from under the yukata he wore, and that sword at his side seemed to make him look cooler. And I see that you brought the dead last with you. He's probably so inadequate that he had to bring a sword with him. Neji, what have I told you about being mean to your cousin on this day? Hinata turned, and saw who it was that spoke. Oh, she knew who it was that was walking towards them. She never did like Neji much after that incident with the Kumo ambassador, and his sensei really freaked her out, but his teammates were a whole different story altogether. She was okay with Rock Lee so long as he didn't start hugging with his sensei. She could have sworn they were both gay. Tenten, on the other hand, was a rather good friend. This is especially true whenever she decides to dress down Neji for, due to lack of a better phrase, being in, and this was because even though Tenten was admittedly weaker than Neji, she still seemed to have the power to talk down to him like a child and get away with it. Just as more words of fire and rage were about to leave her tongue, Tenten turned to see someone she really wanted to see. Naruto. How good it is to see you on this fine day. The confusion in Naruto's face slowly melted away as simply smiled. Tenten, is that you? Well, who else would it be? Rock Lee turned to face Tenten with a look of confusion in his eyes, before realization crossed his big-eyed features. Naruto, isn't that the boy? Before he could finish his sentence, Lee found a hand slapped over his mouth, a hand attached to an arm that belonged to Tenten. Don't mind him, she said, with a sort of grin that hid something behind it. Lee is an honest, hard-working boy, but sometimes he just says the weirdest things. No worries, I've heard weirder. Before she could ponder on that sentence from the mouth of her good friend, she noted something hanging at the left side of his hip. Tenten's eyes had zeroed in on something interesting. Naruto, that SS sword, can I see it please? A quizzical look on Naruto's face had appeared when one eyebrow was raised. I'm sorry, come again. After realizing that she was starting to sound like a fangirl, Tenten calmed herself down, and added an air of professionalism to her voice. May I please see your katana? Not seeing any harm in it, Naruto pulled the katana out from his sash with a sigh. Okay, but please, do be careful with it. This sword was a gift, and so I treasure it greatly. Knowing how samurai and other swordsmen tend to have an attachment to their swords, Tenten nodded in agreement, showing proper etiquette to the katana by bowing before it, and then beginning her inspection. Its sheath was covered in black lacquer and inlaid mother-of-pearl clouds, and its handle was wrapped in leather. However, what made this katana stand out was the tsuba. It was a disc of brass in the shape of a spiral. Oh, she knew whose work this was. Impressive, she said, upon unsheathing the blade and looking at the wave-like pattern of its hamon. It's obviously made with a special kind of steel that reacts with chakra, not to mention the technique used to make it amplify chakra-based attacks without compromising its durability. This isn't a bad sword at all, though, with or without it. Where did you get this? Naruto sighed in elation as he began to recount what had happened. I met a man in Tetsu no Kuni during my training trip a while after I went blind. He was a very powerful old man. From what I could tell of his chakra signature, it seemed like it was withering away, but it was still quite powerful. One day, while training, he was passing by as he watched me practicing a jutsu my sensei taught me at the time while Milan was nearby practicing in her family's style. After a while, we got to speaking. We talked about dreams, what we're learning, and a little about him. He was a nice guy, seemed to be very smart too. Apparently he was a swordsmith, and that he was finding inspiration for his best work or something like that, said his name was Masamune or something like that. Anyway, before he left, he told me to keep on working at my jutsu while he went to work on that sword he started on. 6 months later, old man Masamune finds me on the ground and tired, and just after having finished learning the jutsu sensei taught me, and with Mylan holding my head in her lap. He knelt down, gave me some lunch, and then asked if I mastered the technique yet. I told him I may have gotten the basics of the technique down, but I've a long ways to go before mastering it. He simply chuckled, and then gave me the very sword you're holding in your hand. He called it Mizuhime, and he made me promise to take very good care of her. Since then, Mizuhime's never been parted from me, even after I started getting other weapons. As she continued to inspect this apparently exceptional katana, Tenten could not help but be surprised to think that this sword was Masamune's latest work. Every bladesmith of any specialty worth their salt knew of Gyudo Nyudo Masamune from Tetsu no Kuni, who didn't know of the best swordsmith in the land. His name was known far and wide, and his works were just as legendary, blades of such craftsmanship that they were said to have been able to sever the spirit from the body without even so much as a nick on the skin. And then one day, Masamune stated that he would not be making swords for a time as he had lost his inspiration to make any more, yet here was Naruto, finally giving the man inspiration to make one final katana. A blade of this quality would be worth millions. Upon sheathing the sword, she resolved at that moment to not disclose the news that Masamune had recently died. It's a very beautiful sword, she said, bowing before the blade and handing it back to Naruto, very fitting of its name. Naruto took the sword back, and slung it back in its place at his left side. Thanks for listening, Tenten. So there you are. The voice came from behind Tenten. It was very much masculine, probably belonging to someone in his early 40s. Like most Hyuga members, this one smelled of the bath salts and herbal medicines they were known for. Unlike the other members, however, this voice had the scent of vegetables and sumi-e ink mixed in. However, there was a second set of scents near that man that had the mix of candy and lavender, a feminine scent judging by its soft intensity. I was wondering where you were, and now I see you were here conversing with friends. Hinata could not believe the look on the man's face. To-san. The voice belonged to one Hyuga Hiyashi, with a bit of an amused look on his face. Next to him, however, was a little girl that could be what Hinata would look like should she grow her hair longer. This was Hyuga Hanabi. So I see the rumors are true, it seems you have lost the ability to see. As Hiyashi continued his inspection of the boy, Neji could only look at his uncle in confusion. Why was the head of the clan treating this nobody as if he were an equal? Does he not know that this is the dead last of the academy? Perhaps it would be beneficial to test him out himself and see just how strong he really was. The other Hyuga in the area had mixed reactions. Nami could only share in her brother's confusion. Why would her uncle know of the hot kid in front of her? At first, Hanabi was curious as to why her father knew of this boy she was looking at before she simply looked away. The makings of a blush were beginning to form on her face as she saw his chest from under the yukata. Thank Kami she had not used her Byakugan to see what was underneath. Hinata was the only one that knew that her father wanted to meet Naruto, and so she was not surprised that she knew of him. She was only hoping that he would not say anything embarrassing. Although she was hoping Naruto would be meeting her father on their wedding day, this situation was no less nerve-wracking. Naruto bowed from his waist before the voice. I'm sorry, Hyuga-sama. You know of me, but I am not exactly familiar with you. Forgive my rudeness. I am Hyuga Hiyashi, the head of the Hyuga clan. And with me is my youngest daughter Hanabi. Hinata told me that you aided in the rescue of one of our members from a rapist. I invited you to this festival to thank you for that act. I know of how your birthdays have not exactly been joyous. Truth be told, I've aided in rescuing you several times myself, and I still feel like I haven't done enough. So today I've decided to allow you to attend a festival for a change. I thank you for the kindness Hiyashi-sama, but are you sure your clan members will be fine around me? You've nothing to fear from my clan. The majority of my clan members are more open-minded, and will be fair. If they have any objections, they can take it up with me. In Izuka compound, Kiba simply remained limp. He'd learned these past few weeks to treasure these moments of peace and quiet. He was also thankful that the gay couples that walked on in were merciful enough to leave when their business was done, and he was also thankful that they hadn't made a move on him yet, perhaps because his mother had ordered them simply to torture him with that sight. It was then that he would remember this day as the day he learned what would happen if he tried to rape somebody. Before he could think about his situation any further, Kiba heard the door opening. He was so afraid that he was starting to wet himself, no more. He wanted no more of this horror show he was forced to watch. He learned his lesson, but as he watched the door open, he realized to his relief that it was his mother that walked on in. She had a very angry and disappointed look on her face. He didn't want to see that sight ever again. The second that Tsume was a few inches away from her son, she had stopped. Have you learned your lesson yet? To that, Kiba had a hopeful look in his eyes. His voice had become dead and hoarse from his constant attempts to scream for help, and for his constant state of illness. I have. I won't ever do it again. Good. Now you make sure that it doesn't, because if it does happen again, then you're not just going to watch this again, you're going to be a part of it. Am I clear? Kiba's nod was desperate. He didn't want to be a witness to this horror show ever again, much less a participant. He would have agreed to anything at this point, but his vow to never end up in this position again still applied. Hyuga compound. The festival went on in the Hyuga compound. It was mainly a joyous time as there were members from both branches finally getting together as equals and not as master and servant. The games were being played by the younger children had brought the air of happiness up, and the appearance of the blind stranger that saved one of their own from danger seemed to be a welcome change. Naruto seemed to have a bit of a flair when telling stories, although the fact that he contributed music to the festival with a samisen he found by accident in the compound seemed to help his popularity among the younger Hyuga children as he told his stories in the same fashion as bards of old, although she did catch an adult or two in the crowd. This only served to make 3 girls hot for him. Tenten didn't understand herself why she liked Naruto so much, she just knew that it made her hot just thinking of him. Was it love? She hoped it was, although if that were the case and judging from the looks she noted that Milan and Hinata shared on their faces, she knew that she was likely to have competition, but that was okay. She always did love a challenge. Hinata on the other hand had thoughts of hard pectorals and abs, and how they would be like in the future. She also noted that Naruto's behavior around young children would have made him ideal father material, and as she thought about it more, she came to realize that this was more incentive to have him marry her. Now if she could just work up the spine to ask him out on a date so that she could finally get to work on seducing his brains out gradually if not successfully on the first try. Oh, she knew the other two were looking at her man. Frankly, Milan had no problems with them starting a harem, but that didn't mean she was willing to give Naruto up without a fight. If those girls wanted to marry Naruto-kun, they'd have to earn her approval first, whether they like it or not. And since she was currently the stopgap between Naruto and his honor, she vowed to make it difficult for any girl to try and make a move for him. By the end of the festival, all 3 girls were found sitting around the boy of their affections with cups of tea in their hands. I guess it's time to go, he finally said. It was nice to finally see you two again. Milan picked up Naruto's hand and turned to Tenten and Hinata. We had a great time, Hinata-chan, thank you. You're welcome, you too. The two of them waved as they started leaving, with Milan leading Naruto by the hand back to their apartment. Being the host of her little party, Hinata had started seeing her guests to the door. It was polite to do so after all. Tenten and Lee had followed Neji as they too were invited, the look of intense jealousy shared between Tenten and Hinata was very clear. Although that jealousy seemed to have lightened up with Milan by just a margin, it was still there. Lee on the other hand looked on at confusion at the sight before him, but simply shrugged it off as women embracing the flames of youth, and a boy for that matter. Little did they know, a stalker was following the both of them in the shadows, a stalker with white and grateful eyes directed at Naruto, silently thanking him for saving her from that mean Inuzuka boy. You can pursue him, you know. The Hyuga stalker turned her head quickly upon hearing those words, and found herself seeing the head of the clan looking down on her in amusement. If he is on your mind so much, then pursue his heart, and don't mind the other girl's jealousy, because Naruto is the last of the Uzumaki clan. The stalker's eyes widened in realization, that meant that she could share Naruto with the other girls. But then again, why spoil the fun by telling them? The Hyuga stalker simply chuckled darkly, before her thoughts turned to how she was going to get a piece of Naruto's heart. Streets of Konoha near the Ninja Academy training grounds, 4 months later. She loved dango, she loved the texture, she loved the shape, she loved the variety and flavor, she even loved the various methods in which she could savor the taste of each and every little ball. Now don't get her wrong, Anko liked other foods, even mochi being the big brother of the dango ball, it's just that dango conquered her heart first, especially the ones that corresponded with her name. As she walked down the streets of Konoha, enjoying the green tea flavored goodness of today's special, she decided to take advantage of her break to investigate the status of a certain blonde Jinchuriki. She hadn't had the chance to come on out in a while, given that she was torturing an Iowa spy half to death. The good thing about it was that she won that bet with Ibiki earlier over who would break the poor rock-headed dumbass first. The amount of dango she had purchased normally would have put a dent in her paycheck. A shame, however, that said Iowa spy would not be enjoying the proceeds of her victory, nor would he be tasting the sweet taste of victory she was currently enjoying. In any case, she was walking down to the Ninja Academy to go check up on Naruto. Last time they spoke, Kurenai had said that he had gotten stronger since she last saw him. She didn't want to think about it. When she was there in Naruto's rescue that night before he left on that training trip of his, she counted all the wounds on his body that had healed, several broken ribs, a slashed throat, and a formerly severed arm among others. Needless to say, after that event, she found that she enjoyed torturing her victims even more when said victims have harmed that boy. She didn't know why, but something about him seemed to make her curse mark react in such a manner as to make her want to be closer to him. Now that he has that apparently demonic arm, the feeling had intensified to the point that it was like it wanted her to knock him down, tear off every inch of his clothes, and then ravage him on the spot regardless if they were in public or not. As she continued to eat each ball of her green tea dango very slowly, she found herself at her intended destination. Supposedly Kurenai was standing at this very spot doing her early scouting mission for potential candidates for students. Anko watched as the site was getting prepared. The taijutsu final would involve fighting the teachers, but until then, all matches were student versus student, that much she knew from her time in the Ninja Academy. She watched as Iruka was preparing the dummies for the current competition before committing to sparring again, target practice. She simply watched as many of the students were hurling shuriken left and right, trying to get their aim right. Anko laughed to herself in bitter amusement. Many of those kids were going to die, especially the fangirls, considering that they put more time on wearing makeup than they did on studying. She watched as the Uchiha twins took to the firing range, and prepared their kunai and shuriken for throwing. Sasuke was first, throwing each knife and shuriken with a lot of power behind them, practically destroying the dummy as the thrown blades over-penetrated the dummy. Tsukiko on the other hand, simply focused more on speed, and hit the next dummy with her throwing blades to ensure her target did not escape. Neither twin had scored any less than 9 out of 10 hits with a shuriken, and 10 with kunai. Next up was Hyuga Hinata. Her scores were 8 hits out of 10 with both throwing implements, and then all the way up to Inuzuka Kiba. Anko never really liked Kiba so much. The little perv got what he deserved as far as she was concerned. the boy was really a close-up fighter, so it was no surprise that he had scored 5 out of 10 hits with shuriken and 7 out of 10 with kunai. The most pathetic score, however, went to Haruno Sakura. That screaming banshee was only there because she wanted to seduce Sasuke, because she could store a lot of theoretical information in that hideously large forehead of hers, and because her useless civilian councilwoman of a mother was the headmaster who also happened to be a Naruto hater. No, she never liked the Haruno family one bit. Okay, that wasn't true because there were a few exceptions. Sayuri, her friend and appointed supplier of dango, was an example of the black sheep in the family. But aside from those exceptions, she didn't like the Haruno family by and large. As she watched that spoiled little Haruno girl walk out of the arena with her pathetic score of 4 hits with shuriken and 3 with kunai, Anko watched as Naruto walked on down to the arena. It was embarrassing how she felt her nether regions starting to heat up upon seeing him and his pectorals. It also broke her heart what she heard from Uchiha Makoto, but then again, she still wanted to look into the fog of those cataracts, to see what mysteries were behind those mist-covered blue eyes. She continued to watch as the table was placed in front of Naruto. His response was to poke his finger into his mouth, and then raise it above his head to point it in all directions and then nod in satisfaction. Then he wiped his finger on his vest and then started throwing a shuriken, eliciting a heavy thunk from the impact before he started picking up and throwing each and every implement at the dummy, earning him a 10 out of 10 on both weapons rather quickly. It was then that Anko understood why he did what he did with his finger. He was calculating wind speed and direction so that when he threw his shuriken and kunai, they would fly faster and stronger. It also seemed hot to her when he did that, like a bondage scene where she would. Her thoughts were interrupted when she realized exactly what she was thinking. No way. What crossed her mind was nothing short of statutory rape. She'd get thrown in prison for such an act. But then again, her mind had reminded her of the fact that as soon as Naruto graduates from the academy, he's fair game, but for now, she'll have to be patient and settle for that image in her head, in addition to watching the fun as students kick the crap out of each other in the spars, and she had plenty of dango in that paper bag of hers to enjoy the show. Ninja Academy training grounds, an hour and a half later. Iruka sighed. While he was proud of several of his students, he couldn't say the same for the majority. A good deal of the civilian boys had gotten better, some were even meeting the standard for a ninja graduate, but others were more concerned with trying to win the hearts of the top 5 girls in the class. This was the case with the majority of the girls. A lot of them were too busy fawning over Sasuke to care about their studies, although some starting to join a fan club for Naruto with Ino being the apparent president. The only good thing about the Naruto fan club was that the apparent requirement for membership was that the girl had to want to get stronger, which was in fact an improvement for those girls, not by much, but at least it made them study more. Sakura, on the other hand, was not happy that the number of Sasuke fan girls were dwindling, and the fact that Sasuke was a part of the apparent fan club for Naruto didn't help matters any when said fan girls joined the Naruto fan club just to get to Sasuke. Still, what he thought of those die-hard Sasuke loyalists was simple: it was their loss. He had watched as many of the students beat each other to a pulp, and the majority of the boys had finally broken out of their stalemates to compete against the clan children and Naruto. Unfortunately, they never stood a chance, and then came the girls' matches. The founding members of the Naruto fan club had proven to be every bit as competent as the boys when they beat down the competition. Nobody was able to stand up to the ninja children. Then came the matches of ninja versus ninja. As he was about to announce the first fighters, the twins appeared before Iruka. "We're sorry for the interruption, Iruka-sensei," began Sasuke. "But we have a bit of a special request for the first match of the finals," finished Tsukiko. Now this had his attention. What could the twins possibly want? "I'm listening." Sasuke simply grinned. He was waiting for this day. Perhaps today was the day that he would get even for that week of free ramen he had to pay for the dobi. Although treating the idiot actually made him feel good then, it still hurt his pride and wallet. "Our mother has been teaching us in the art of the sword." Tsukiko was excited at the prospects of seeing where she stood when faced against Naruto. Her mother had been training them quite hard in the art of kenjutsu, and she wanted to actually test herself, maybe even get a shot at that fine of Naruto's, and we want to test our skills against the only other swordsman in class. It was here that both twins finished at the same time, and so with your express permission we'd like to borrow some shinai from the academy in order to challenge Uzumaki Naruto to a sword duel. Iruka had considered his options with their request, and saw no problems with it. Very well then, if the three of you will just wait here. 5 minutes had passed, and Iruka finally returned with 3 shinai. Okay then, the two of you can fight Naruto in a one-on-one duel each. The rules are simple. One mortal strike ends the match, so any unblocked blow to the stomach, neck, and head will result in a loss. Also, if you are forced out of the ring, that also loses you the match. You may use chakra, but you may not use any jutsu. The use of any jutsu at any point in the match will disqualify you automatically, understood? The 3 fighters nodded. The first up to fight was Sasuke. Even in the second that both him and Naruto had arrived at the stands, the grin had never left his face. He now had a chance to get even, and the power to fight his opponent on a level playing field. Makoto had increased the weights in their training regimen, and so now they were even stronger. It won't be long now. All he has to do is avenge Itachi's treachery against the family, and then there will no longer be any need for the deception. Sasuke stood facing down his opponent, sword raised in the air, prepped and ready to strike down on his opponent. The die-hard Sasuke fangirls were cheering, hoping that their idol would finally beat down this blind and hunky eyesore and show him his place. They were hoping that if they couldn't have Sasuke, then they'd have his opponent as a slave at the very least, and a very hot slave at that. Naruto simply stood in a ready stance with his sword behind him. As usual, he was using only one hand as his left arm was right in front of him. Sasuke could only ponder as to why his opponent only fought one-handed. Granted, he was powerful enough with only one hand, as evidenced by how badly he was beaten the first time he dueled with swords against Naruto, but it still begged the question as to why he wouldn't use both hands. He simply shrugged off his question, and switched from the high Joden no Kame his mother taught him to properly use, to the low Gedan no Kame, and then charged his opponent silently, hoping his lack of a battle cry would improve his odds. The second he swung that sword from the hip, he watched as Naruto switched from the normal grip to an underhanded grip before getting to one knee and intercepting his opponent's shinai with his and using his left arm to reinforce the block before pushing the blade away and using that momentum to swing his shinai upwards. Sasuke immediately intercepted that swing and immediately countered with a thrust before Naruto spun away from the attack and mischievously tapped the blade of his shinai at his opponent's left butt cheek. Oh, he was going to pay now. As much as the girly side of him wanted to feel that spank again, Sasuke's main emotion at the moment was rage, and that showed when he started swinging his shinai rather quickly and getting closer and closer. Naruto soon realized his mistake, as many of the blows were too quick for him to block, and so it forced him on the defensive. He needed to end this quickly. With one well-timed power strike, he knocked away Sasuke's shinai, spun around, and locked the edge of his shinai against Sasuke's throat. Before he could struggle, Sasuke heard those words from Naruto. Fast and deadly, reminds me of Uchiha Tsukiko. Sasuke's eyes widened as his muscles tensed in shock. He could tell him apart from his sister now. How could this be? But then again, he could only grin. This was but the first step in which Tsukiko would be honest with the boy she came to love. Yes, love, the emotion that seemed to be shared with Satsuki regarding the same boy, the girl that was disguised as her at the very moment. Maybe we can treat you to ramen sometime after this. This time, Naruto whispered in Sasuke's ear. I'm looking forward to it one day, but we've still got to hold up your disguise. So, at this point, Naruto's voice had increased enough for everyone to hear. Do you surrender? Sasuke feigned a look of defeat in his eyes. Yes, I surrender. As Naruto released his opponent from the grab he held, he then had to deal with the screaming banshees that made up the die-hard Sasuke fangirls as they booed him from the stands. Accusations of cheating and harassment were being fired at him, a shame that none of them knew the truth of Uchiha Sasuke's gender, nor did they know of his true identity. They then watched with a bit of pride that at least an Uchiha would put this baka in place, even if it was Uchiha Tsukiko that would do the deed. I hope you're ready, Naruto-kun, she said, her voice starting to take on a slight nasal tone to it, as she took on the Chuden no Kame stance, because unlike Brother Dearest, I never make the same mistake twice. Upon hearing this, even the girls started having a nosebleed. This was the voice they'd ever heard Tsukiko make. Naruto simply stood at the ready with his sword behind him in one arm. Oh, he was ready for this. You want a piece of me? Then come and get me, Uchiha, I'm just dying to dance with you. The amused look on Tsukiko's face was clear. Not only did he realize the difference between the twins, but she also knew what he meant by dance. What kind of gentleman invites a lady to a dance and then makes her come to him? Her opponent's response was simple. He grinned widely as he answered, the kind that is very patient and would like for the lady to make the first move. Fine then, if you insist. Tsukiko began the fight by switching to Juden no Kame, and charging her opponent intent on swinging down the shinai upon Naruto's shoulder. Naruto smirked and swung upward, but to his surprise, Tsukiko quickly changed the direction of her swing and brought the shinai down upon his, and the two bamboo blades met, and Naruto found himself exerting more force to hold the swing before Tsukiko softened her grip and forcing Naruto to clumsily follow through with his movement. Once she saw the opportunity, she made an attempt to strike him in the torso for what would be a killing blow. Victory was hers until Naruto changed the grip of his shinai at the last moment and drove the tip down to the ground in order to stop the strike at the last moment, exerting all the force in his arm to hold it there before he moved in closer to drive Tsukiko back with an elbow. Impressive, he said, tension building up from the excitement. Besides Milan, you're about the only person I can fight seriously with. If you really were serious about fighting, you'd have used both hands, and I know you're capable of using that left hand of yours. Strange and dangerous looking as it is, you can still use it properly. I'm only holding back because it simply makes the duels more interesting. Well, let's see how interesting you find this. Before anybody could react, Tsukiko charged Naruto at point blank with the intent of knocking that shinai out of his hand and going for the kill, until she saw Naruto disappear, and then realizing that he was about to end this duel with a downward strike aimed at her head which she managed to block. Unfortunately for Tsukiko, that single block had sealed her fate, as the strike that was aimed for her head was rather light, and then she felt Naruto spin around and strike her from the front and across the stomach, ending the duel with his back to her. Once Naruto put down the sword, and Tsukiko did the same, she watched as he turned to face her, wishing he could see the look of satisfaction on her face. Before long, Sasuke also walked on up to Naruto to stand next to his sister, and then both twins bowed from their hips at their adversary. We thank you for the duel, began Sasuke. And now we know that we've still a long ways to go, continued Tsukiko. We look forward to sparring with you again at another time. But until then, make sure you're ready for the day we beat you. They both finished at the same time, satisfied with what they had to say before they went up the stands. Naruto simply grinned. It was a good fight and he enjoyed it. As he walked up the stands with the Uchiha twins, he could not help but have chills of excitement at the prospect of fighting both twins at once. Nearby the Ninja Academy training grounds. Anko had seen it. Naruto was fighting well against two Uchiha in a row. Although that spanking he performed on Sasuke seemed to be a dirty and perverted trick, she also found it to be kinky, wishing she were in that girl's place getting spanked instead. Yes, she knew the secret of the twins, and Yamanaka Inoichi only had himself to blame for letting it slip, and he knew that snippet of information because, aside from the flower shop and the torture and interrogation department, his job was to erase the memories of anyone who found out that both of the Uchiha twins were girls. Good thing he never found out that Anko was around the corner, and listening when he spoke of them. She understood why the secret was kept. The days before she became an Anbu member were still fresh in her mind. It was only thanks to Old Man Hokage that she had been saved from rape attempts. Naruto, on the other hand, was not as lucky, as there were a good number of rape attempts made at him, some of which were successful. She had stepped in many times to save him, and there were few times when she was too late, and many of which were perpetrated by men. She took more pleasure from torturing those offenders than any other, as those men found themselves less so by the time she was done with them. She was also there to comfort him whenever his friend Tenten was not around, to be there for him whenever it happened. Good thing for them too, because she was certain that girl would not settle for anything less than personally castrating every man responsible for Naruto's misery. Anko was, on the other hand, surprised that he found himself comfortable with physical contact with other people, perhaps that Baihei girl was responsible for healing that part of him. All other thoughts aside, she found herself satisfied with her free of Naruto's body, and her bag of dango empty as she had eaten them all. All Anko had to do was wait for the Gaki to graduate, and then she was free to work her feminine wiles on him, in order to show him how to love a woman properly, and all the while, show him how should be done properly. But in the meantime, she could take her anger at some people of the village out on the next unfortunate prisoner that found his way into the T&I department, and if that prisoner happened to be a woman, then all the better, in order to vent out her frustration. Near the Ninja Academy, almost an hour after class. Naruto and Milan had just gotten out of class when they had been stopped briefly. Naruto-kun, Milan-chan, called Tenten, running towards them. How are the two of you? We're fine, thank you, Tenten, said Milan, pulling Naruto closer to her. How are you this fine day? Oh, fine. My dad wanted to meet Naruto-kun though, said he wanted to take a look at his weapons. My weapons? He did say something along those lines. Said since he wants to meet you, he may as well inspect your weapons for you as well, perhaps even sharpen them a bit. Naruto seemed to consider that. He never did meet Tenten's dad, although given the fact that several of the parents he met so far were nicer to him, did not lift enough of his wariness around a lot of other people. He only managed to start trusting other people again after training under GSD Sensei, and then it only got better when Milan came into his life. But then again, where was the harm in meeting her father? He had more to gain than to lose by going. At least he'll learn if her father was one of those stupid animals that call themselves human beings. I'll come, he said. After all, I may never know when I'll be using my weapons again. Maybe you can get yourself something you'll like too, Milan. Her eyes had brightened up upon hearing that. Milan had in fact been looking for some fighting gloves for a while now, although she could have sworn that there was an ulterior motive behind it on Tenten's part. She knew she also wanted some cool weapons in order to be ready to fight. Maybe while she's at it, she'll get a wedding ring prepared for herself. Little did they know that as they were leaving the academy grounds, glares were being directed at Tenten, a pair of very jealous and very Uchiha glares peering out from around the corner, and on top of each other. Oh, it'll be a cold day in the 13 basement floors of hell before they would be outdone by the weapons mistress of Konoha. Elsewhere, the sun was setting, and the grassy plain was splattered with blood violently expelled from their bodies and from the dismembered stumps found on various ninja. Some of the unfortunate victims were burnt away until there was not even a drop of fat on their charred bones, others were frozen while their unfortunate colleagues were impaled by ice spikes behind them. There were no survivors, and each ninja wore a hite-8 with a musical note on it, denoting that they were all ninja from Otogakure no Sato. Scratch that, there was only one survivor, and he was trembling in fear before the blind old man that had just decapitated another of his colleagues with a katana. The body fell to the ground on its knees as the arterial spray rose like a fountain in front of the old man before he used his free hand to gently push the body back. The old man flicked the blood off the blade of his katana, and then turned his attention to the last remaining Oto ninja. I must apologize for the mess, he began, as he started walking towards him, drawing his short sword, but you refused to give me the information I required. Tell me what I want to know, and I may let you live depending on how useful your information is. The tremors racking the ninja's body were such that it would not be out of place if he had urinated on himself. He was not even holding his kunai with a steady hand. BBB bullshit. Why your JJ just GGG gonna KKK kill me AAA is SSSS soon as I tell why you anything. The blind swordsman's response was to sigh, as he quickly closed the distance and cut the ninja's kunai holding hand off before pointing the edge of the blade against his neck as soon as he was on his knees from the pain. I will kill you now if you don't tell me anything. But if you tell me what I want to know, then you'll at least have a chance for survival. Now tell me, what is your master up to? You may as well kill him now GSD, said a voice hiding in the tree line. Those ninja from Oto are die-hard loyalists to their leader. I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to take his own life just to spite you. The Oto nin turned to see just who it was that spoke, walking in an iron-gray shinobi shozoku and a red vest over it, and on a pair of geta was an old man with a forehead protector with the kanji for oil on it. Damn it. This was Jiraiya of the Sannin. This just was not his day today. And then his eyes had widened in both fear and shock when he had heard the name that was apparently in reference to the old man before him. Oh, he'd heard stories in the shadows about this man. They say he was such a great swordsman that he even taught the Rakudo Sennin himself. Jiraiya, it has been a long time, began GSD, not taking sword or his attention off the dying Oto nin, although I do have to ask, what are you doing here? After hearing rumors that you were looking for something, I decided to track you down. I thought perhaps we were after the same thing. If you speak of those 10 rogue ninja that are chasing after the Biju, then I can tell you here and now that this is a matter I have no interest in at the moment. My concern is that of a greedy coward doing something very evil and very foolish, and I aim to stop him before he continues what he's doing. Jiraiya had a look of surprise on his face, before it had melted into confidence. And what if I tell you that I have information for you to help in your investigation? Is that so? The Oto nin saw that the two old men were distracted, and began to reach for the pull string to the explosive tags lining his robes. If he was going down, he may as well take these two old farts with him. No sooner than he touched the ring of the pull string, his last view was of the world falling down, and then he saw his own body, and old man GSD's sword having moved across his shoulders. I'm listening.